In recent months, due in large part to COVID-19, many states have experienced a surge in fraudulent unemployment claims. However, this type of organized crime has been happening for years. The true prevalence of this issue and what to do if it happens to you is up next on Employment Law After Hours. All right, everyone, welcome back to Employment Law After Hours, your favorite weekly YouTube series discussing the issues keeping HR professionals up at night. I'm Monica.
And I'm Brian.
And before we tee up the issue of fraudulent unemployment claims, Brian's going to hit you with some disclaimers.
Absolutely. So as an attorney, we do have to give you the disclaimer that anything we say here today should not be taken as legal advice. It is solely meant for education and entertainment purposes only. We are employed by a law firm called Brennan, Manna & Diamond with offices in Ohio, Florida, and Arizona. However, we do have licensed attorneys throughout the country. So if you feel that you would like to speak with an attorney about some of the information we've discussed here today, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And if we can help you out, we'll be in touch. So as Monica teed up, today we're going to discuss fraudulent unemployment filings. Now, before we get started, I think it's important that we discuss actually how widespread this issue is. I'm going to give you some statistics out of Ohio because that's what's readily available and published. Not every state publishes this information, but we feel that this information can be extrapolated across the whole country. So just in March of 2021 alone, in Ohio, there were 128,000 unemployment filings. Of that 128,000, 19,000 of them were flagged as being fraudulent filings. That's approximately 15% of all the filings in March of 2021 as being fraudulent. So let's talk about what that means monetarily. So in Ohio, during the last year, they've paid out approximately $9.5 billion in unemployment funds. Of that $9.5 billion, at least $330 million have been deemed fraudulent. That's quite the widespread issue that's not only impacting the state's funds, but also impacting employers. So what has caused this rise in fraudulent unemployment filings? There's a couple reasons. First, because of the pandemic, there's been a massive increase in the number of unemployment filings. This has caused an overwhelming burden on the system. The second issue leading to a rise in fraudulent unemployment filings is the fact that we are having less hearings on these cases. Again, because of the sheer volume of unemployment filings, they're not able to process every filing for a hearing, even when appealed by the employer. So the fraudsters recognize that there's not going to be as much scrutiny on their claims for investigation because there's just, again, too many claims to fully vet and evaluate and investigate.
So that sort of begs the question, Brian, where are these even coming from? How are these happening? And what can you do to sort of shield yourself, protect yourself from this happening to you? So I think it's important to note that this is stemming from organized crime rings. So these are going to be groups of hackers who in one way or another have gotten your information. Typically, the tactics that they're going to use is going to mean that they're getting your information off the black market, the dark web, collecting information based on previous security breaches or times where your information, personal information, social security numbers, etc., have been compromised in the past and are sort of still lingering out there on the web. And in turn, that information is up for sale, up for grabs. And then hackers are going to be using that to input into the various databases to be able to obtain either more information on you, enough to file such a claim, or they've been given enough information that they can just directly go into the Department of Job and Family Services website and file the claim themselves. A couple of things just to note. This is not just necessarily, they are making the claims themselves, which they can. So just from the get, creating an account under your information, inputting it, and then asking for unemployment benefits. Another way that they're coming at it is by somehow getting your login information if you've previously filed a claim or you're in the midst of an unemployment claim process, getting your login information, password, whatnot, and then getting into your account and redirecting the funds to be deposited into their own accounts or a third-party account. Obviously we need to be making sure that we've got strong passwords, strong usernames, whatnot, and that we're doing everything that we can to take those precautionary steps.
So just kind of follow up with what Monica said there. I mean, for many of you that may not know, for anyone who's had their identity stolen in the past, that information is likely floating out there on the dark web for purchase from hackers, or as the IRS likes to call them, disorganized crime units that will then buy or steal that information and then file those unemployment claims on behalf of those individuals, pretending that they're employees. So they have this information and they just make that claim. And even if they don't know the employer, they may just make up an employer, sticking in there a real company just to try to get that money. money, and they know that they'll be long gone with the funds by the time anyone discovers what they've done.
Right.
So a question we often get asked is, how do we know if a fraudulent unemployment claim has been filed? So there's a couple ways you can find out. The first is your employee will receive a 1099-G, which reflects the fact that they received unemployment benefits. Obviously, if your employee has never filed for unemployment, they would not be expecting a 1099-G and would be quite surprised by the fact they received that. So typically that employee is going to receive that 1099-G. Obviously, over the last couple of months, a lot of these forms have been mailed out as part of this tax season. They would come to their employer, say, hey, I received this 1099-G in the mail. I've never filed for unemployment benefits. What's going on here? That's going to tip off that employer that there has been a fraudulent filing. The second way employers learn of fraudulent filings is when they receive the request for employee information from the department that handles unemployment filings. When an employee files for unemployment, they send out a form for the employer to fill out, basically providing the dates of employment, how much they made, the reason for separation. If an employer receives that form for an employee who's obviously still working there, it's going to be quite surprising to them, and that's going to tip them off that there's likely a fraudulent filing. So that begs the question then, what do we do in the event that we discover a fraudulent unemployment filing? So I'm going to kind of break this down into what an employee needs to do versus what an employer needs to do. So starting first with an employee needs to report this filing to the State Department that handles unemployment benefits. So most states now have a link that says report fraudulent filing. They would click on that, report the filing as fraudulent. Second thing they need to do is they need to alert one of the 3 credit reporting agencies to alert them to the fact that their identity has likely been stolen, and the credit reporting agency needs to be on the lookout, for open bank accounts, loans, etc., just to tip off the private organizations that, hey, an identity theft has occurred. The third thing they need to do is go to the federal government's identity theft website, again, to report a possible theft of their identity. So essentially, the employee has reporting obligations to the State Department that handles unemployment benefits, to the private entities through the credit bureaus, and then 3 to the federal government through their identity theft reporting portal. So next, shifting gears to what an employer needs to do if they discover a fraudulent unemployment filing. The first and main thing that they're going to do is when they receive a request for information on an employee, they would write fraud basically all over that document and answer in response to each of the fields on that form, submit that form back into the state department that handles those filings just to alert them right away that it's fraudulent. They can also try to call the department as well in addition to submitting that form, again, to tip everyone off as much as you can that this is fraudulent. Now, a lot of these systems are overwhelmed, so they may not be able to get through via call, so always submit that written form as well. The employer can also utilize the fraudulent link that many state departments have to report the filing, again, but the employee can be the one responsible for doing that. You just want to make sure you tip off that employee to the necessity to file that fraudulent filing. So now I'm going to shift gears to Monica, who's going to describe to you certain situations where you may get an unemployment filing that's not actually fraudulent, but still will require attention from the employer.
All right, so it's important to know that there are going to be a couple of types of claims where you might get some sort of notice that a claim has been filed with the Department of Job and Family Services or your corresponding state agency saying that, an employee has filed for unemployment benefits, but they are going to be valid claims for unemployment benefits, so sort of just separate and apart from what we're talking about today with the fraudulent claims. So the first one is going to be claims that have been filed by employees, and maybe they have a misunderstanding as to their eligibility. So, Brian, if you want to explain more about that.
So these situations are typically going to arise when an employee has a misunderstanding as to whether they're eligible for unemployment, as Monica indicated. So, for example, many states have a reduction in hours threshold or a reduction in pay threshold that would apply, allowing a current employee, for example, to get unemployment benefits to cover the difference between a reduction in pay or hours versus what they ultimately made, so they can receive a tiny bit of unemployment. Some employees may file for unemployment thinking they're eligible for meeting that threshold, but they're actually not quite eligible yet. That's not fraudulent. That's just a situation where an employer is going to want to fill out the employee response form, submit it back, say, hey, yeah, we did reduce their hours, but only by 5% or not enough to meet that threshold. So again, not fraudulent, just something the employer needs to respond to.
All right, and then the other instance where, again, not totally fraudulent, however, something to be mindful for as employers start reviewing these potential claims are going to be those by former employees who filed for unemployment, however, may not have necessarily been truthful in the reason that they were fired. So, under certain circumstances, employees are not eligible for unemployment benefits, however, may subsequently file for unemployment, alleging a different reason for their loss of employment. And those are going to be things that should be red flags when they come across an employer's desk, as those are things that you're not going to want to have to pay out of pocket if for some reason the employee is not eligible based on their reason for termination.
Sure. So a situation where this typically arises is where you've, let's say, terminated an employee for no call, no showing for 3 days in a row. You send them an email, hey, you're terminated. They then turn around and file for unemployment with the stated reason that they were laid off for lack of work. Again, this is a filing by the actual employee seeking benefits, so it's not fraudulent. However, the employee was less than truthful on their reason for separation from employment. So in these cases, the employer is going to want to fill out the employee response form, get that turned in, stating, hey, we terminated them for cause, no call, no show 3 days in a row. Here's the policy they violated. Again, so just to make sure the employer challenges those unemployment filings.
Right, absolutely. And in situations like that, that is the perfect opportunity where you would want to involve some sort of legal counsel, because you want to make sure that if you're asking for reconsideration from your state agency, that you're asserting all of the right legal and non-legal arguments, you've got your facts in order, and you know exactly what to say so that, you're not putting yourself in jeopardy when it comes to that reconsideration process.
So that's all we have for you today on Employment Law After Hours. Don't forget to click that subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that like button if you feel so inclined. And then also we hope you click on that bell. That way you're notified next time we upload videos. We'll see you next week.
We look forward to it.